fire.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm Ryan Higginbotham,
I'm Casey Higginbotham.
and we're here, if you don't know, because of a paddle expedition we did from Alaska down to Mexico. But before we dive into that, I always like to start out with a story. And this is a story of when we were going around the Columbia River Bar. Some of you may know about it, some of you may not, but it's at the geographic border between Washington and Oregon. So it's sunk in about 2,000 ships. It's known as the graveyard. It's taken countless lives. And every day leading up to this, for a week straight, we heard a story about from somebody we met on the beach, about someone who had died there. You know, a brother, a sister, a friend, a loved one. And it started getting to our heads. And I think Casey was for sure going a little crazy at that point. He thought that he was going to die that day. And, you know, I had uncertainties myself about how the day would go. It's a significant crossing, and it can look like that. And, you know, we did just as we'd done for the previous 3 months. We loaded up our gear that day, had our goal. We set out to go around this danger zone and do a 5-mile loop or 5-mile radius from the outer jetties right there. What ended up happening is that we were pushed out about 12 miles from shore, and we didn't know what was going on. It was supposed to be flooding, so you think we'd be getting pushed towards shore, but we figured the power of the river pushed us out. And really at that point, we just said we don't care what time we get in. If it's 10 o'clock the next day, if it's 10 o'clock that night, it didn't matter. We were going to make it to Oregon. Casey turned the weather radio off, and we just said we don't care what hits us. We're going to get to shore. And at 9 o'clock at night, there's still some light out, and we made it to Oregon. But those are the moments on something like this where you wonder, what the hell are we doing out here?
Yeah, what Ryan was just sharing with you guys is one of the many stories and all these challenges we faced on our way to completing an unsupported 2,200-mile prone paddling expedition from Ketchikan, Alaska to Tijuana, Mexico. Well, we crossed into the border. But what we're going to talk to you guys about is how we learned more in 7 months on the water than I had in the previous 24. And really touch on the failures and successes of the expedition, and how there's two things we felt we wanted to share with you. One is based on efficiency, and that it's an umbrella term really for the action and what you're thinking and what you're doing to try to achieve that goal. And then the next would be the tools you use. So gear, every piece of gear you're using along the way. But to kick that off, I think we'll start with our background, really.
Yeah, to give you, the whole, how we came up with this idea, it's really related to where we come from. So we come from Pismo Beach, California. Do any of you know where Pismo Beach is? Okay, we got at least a couple. So it's Central California, and we've grown up in the water. We're surfers, we're lifeguards, and we've grown up exploring our surroundings. And at a certain point, you want to go bigger. We paddled around, we've surfed, we've swam the coastline, and it's that curiosity that really pushes you to want to see something bigger and want a bigger adventure. And that's essentially what we got. We thought we were watermen, we're surfers. You come in and have beer and fish tacos every day, and then here we are, months later, we're out pulling off these old wetsuits, eating dehydrated food, freezing our asses off. But there's a great quote by Apsley Cherry Garrard, and he's an explorer author. I think sums it up. It's that exploration is the physical expression of intellectual passion, and that really resonated with me in that desire to keep going. When you do something without a precedent and push the limits, you're going to learn more than you could have ever imagined.
Yeah, so the idea of it, I wish I could tell you guys it was something that was profound, but really we were just shooting the shit one night, March of 2015, talking about pushing the limits. We've been athletes our whole life and wanted to do something more. And I remember we're going back and forth, and I wanted to take horses across Mongolia, and then I realized I don't know a single thing about horses at all.
Not only horses, I don't think I could keep the horse alive. I killed my roommate's houseplant. I can't keep girlfriends. There's no way I'm going to be going with a horse across Mongolia. But we knew a little bit about the ocean, so
yeah, we nixed that one pretty quick. Horses on Mongolia wasn't going to happen, and then Ryan just said Alaska to Mexico, and I said I'm in, and it stuck. And it was something that it's really hard to bring an idea to fruition. I'm sure you guys know anybody who's taken on a challenge. You're always talking about things, and you're like, oh, let's do that, but it's so hard to really make something tangible and bring it through.
So from there, we're wondering, where do we start? So we're surfers, we're paddleboard. You know, we did a little bit of paddling before this, but we're not around a big paddle community. And I didn't know much about paddleboards, so as you know, millennials do, I got on the computer and Googled best paddleboards, and what came up was Joe Bark Paddleboards. He's around here somewhere today, and I didn't know what to expect. I contacted Joe, said, "Hey Joe, this is Ryan Higginbotham. My brother and I want to paddle from Alaska down to Mexico." So I don't know what to expect. He probably thinks we're crazy and whatever, but he, you know, a couple days later, I get a message. It's, hey Ryan, it's Joe Bark. Sounds like a wild paddle. Let's talk boards. And 2 weeks later, we're down at the Bark shop. Joe's figuring out the volume we're going to need to make this paddle. We designed a rack system where the bags would stay off the boards. You can see that right here, so that water can pass underneath, because we knew we'd need that in the weather we'd encounter.
And I think we got the boards in October of 2015, and we didn't really know where to go with this. We have no idea how to actually bring forth this expedition, but we knew to train. So from there, here's a photo of us getting the boards, training in a harbor on an extremely nice day, and we're just preparing for this thing without really getting to the nuts and bolts of it yet. But here's a training video our buddies put through, and it's from our hometown.
You're either laying down or on your knees, hand paddling.
Yeah, so, we're training up, building it, but we have to find a way to really assemble everything and figure out where we're going, how we're going to do it. And we used Google Earth, which turned out to be a great tool. I literally had to figure, okay, obviously you can't bring your water, you're going to have to collect it. So what we did is I jumped on Google Earth and spent 10 days charting every single night, every single spot, to make sure we had a water source and a decent protected area to camp. And then there we go. We're buying charts. I think we bought 115 charts, so we'd be able to take it along the water. So no matter what, we'd have some sort of direction.
From there, we have the water source. We've mapped every day. What do we need to stay alive besides the water? We need food. So we ended up with a ton of dehydrated food. It's all about low volume, low weight. I'm sure a lot of you are hikers and backpackers and know that after about a week of this stuff, it gets pretty old.
Yeah, when we were 18, I remember we bought a boat. I don't know why. We bought a speedboat. It was actually pretty rad, but we ran out of money prepping for the paddle because we're doing anything to make it happen. And we put the boat up on Craigslist, sold it, and that money went straight to dehydrated food and ended up with 330 pounds of it a couple weeks later.
So like I said, a lot of you are probably backpackers. We took a note off that PCT style, and we shipped our food, and we shipped the marine charts about every 200 miles down the coast. We found that there was a small town about 200, 250 miles that we could find. There's Casey picking up the first one.
Yeah, thank you for the help. Appreciate it.
We kept moving down. So there, we've got our maps. We're charted out. We have our water source that we're planned on. We've got our food. From there on, what do we need to survive? We need to stay warm, on and off the water.
Yeah, it was difficult deciding where to go with wetsuits because you can't wear a dry suit because you're going to be like the Michelin Man. You can't move. You're not going to be able to go anywhere. But if you wear a 2-mil suit, you're going to die. So you have to find that balance. And luckily, Patagonia came through for us and sent us the R4s, which have Ulex on the inside, so they're a little bit warmer and more flexible than you'd get out of a wetsuit that's typically 4 mil. And we had booties, gloves, and neoprene beanies, and everything that at the time we thought would be warm enough to suit our needs on the water.
This is us actually jumping in the Skeena River on the way up when we realized that after we were in the water for about 15 minutes, our hands were numb for about 30, and we needed some thicker gloves and booties, and we had to go to a dive shop. But by March of last year, we had essentially all the gear we needed to make the paddle.
it wasn't a very organized process in the beginning. We just were saying, okay, this is what we're going to need here and there. Here's what we'll need every day. And we started sending out notes to sponsors, and really, we weren't getting much back because everybody goes, oh, what have you done? Well, we hadn't done anything. We were trying to figure it out there. You know, we knew we wanted to film it, so we had to find a way to charge our cameras. Luckily, Voltaic Systems came through with a solar panel and charger. We knew we wanted to work with them because they waterproof everything really well. So we talked with them, and they set us up so we could charge all of our cameras on board.
Along with that, I mean, this is an example of about what one of us would carry. Casey would carry most of the food. I would carry most of the safety gear. But I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. We had a shotgun up in BC because we were terrified of grizzly bears, and that's what you hear about when you come from California. You know, flares. We had our camp stove.
And then, I mean, one of the most important things, obviously, is what environment are you going to be in? And we knew we were going to be in the water every day in some places that rain 16 feet a year. So we had to get the best dry bags we could. We talked to Watershed, and they set us up with these bags right here, and there's another one under the board. But they're submergible. You can beat them up. And we didn't want to compromise on gear because we knew we were going to be in the middle of nowhere, and we had really no option.
So by, I think it was March 9th of last year, we basically loaded up the truck. We were good to go. We thought we had everything that we thought we needed, and some stuff we did, some stuff we didn't. It was Casey and myself, my friend Kellen, and I got in the truck, loaded up, and headed north to Alaska. And it's funny when you're driving up. You know, we come from an area where there's really nice weather, and you drive up, and you know the mountains are big. The weather's getting gnarlier, the rivers are bigger, and then along with that is the reality of what you're doing and the excitement, the fear. Everything is just getting bigger as we move north up to Alaska.
Yeah, it starts snowing on you, and you're just like, oh, man, it's actually pretty rough up here. And I remember we finally made it up to Prince Rupert, which is the northern end of BC, and you have to take a ferry over to Ketchikan. And we're on the ferry, we jump on, and all we have is our gear and our boards. And we're going through the Dixon entrance, which separates Canada and Alaska. And you're cruising through, and the storm hits. And it's raining, and the boat starts rocking. And I'm just looking out at the mountains, and it's dark. And has anybody seen Lord of the Rings? Yeah? Okay, I'm sure most of us have. To me, it looked like Mordor. I'm just like, oh, no. Like, this is really what we're going to have to go back through. But it was a gut check moment where you're all, okay, we've prepared, we've planned as well as we could, and we've done everything we can up until this point. So now we just have to test our gear and our commitment to the paddle.
So we got off in Ketchikan holding our boards so they wouldn't blow away in the wind. And we thankfully, I mean, we've met amazing people along this whole journey. And we met a great guy, a great family, and they took us in. And we stayed in Ketchikan and really waited for a weather window where we could make a break. And it was March 18th. Last year, we set off from Ketchikan Mountain Point, and there's so much of a build-up around here. You've been training, preparing, and the number one thing that I was thinking about taking off from this spot is that there are a few people gathered to see these idiots go off and see us for the last time. All I was thinking about is that I did not want to tip over right as I set off from the dock, and we hadn't done any runs with gear on our boards. We had about 75 pounds each, and I just didn't want to tip in that first mile. I figured they'd call Coast Guard, and it would look pretty bad.
Yeah, the no gear run was more because we didn't get all the gear assembled literally until about a week before we left. It was just kind of make it happen and get up there. But the first few days out there was pretty much casual. I mean, that's as good as it gets in March. So
I set up the camera and we paddled by because it was that nice. Coming into this cove in Alaska in March, it was a pretty dreamy time. But there's a great quote I like to say. It's an Yvon Chouinard quote that adventure doesn't start until things go wrong. And that was definitely characteristic in this. So we get in, it's really nice. You know, I want to take some footage, get complacent, and I didn't realize till that night that I lost a wetsuit glove. And it's day 5. I lose a glove. You know, we hear on the weather radio that the weather's going sour, and things were not looking good. Casey freaked out on me.
Oh, I was so mad. I'm thinking 4 days in, we lose a glove. You know, the water's 40 degrees, the air is 40 and below, and you're just thinking, well, great, Ryan, it's over, or he's going to lose, a couple fingers or something. I wasn't sure how we were going to solve the problem at the time.
He was a real dick that day, to put it lightly. And so I wrote that night. I wrote in my journal. I wrote 4 options for how I was going to get through the next day, without ruining this whole journey. And I ended up putting a bootie on my hand and a wool sock on my foot. And I took a photo of it right there. He made me promise that I wouldn't take any footage till we got to our next stop, because he blamed, taking photos and footage for me losing the glove, which essentially it was. I wasn't thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, you're up there. You can't lose your mind on something else. But that day set a precedent for what the rest of most of the paddle was going to be, or at least most of Canada. We were going to be cold, wet, and hungry every single day, and it didn't seem to change. We ran into storms, and it was just this relentless grind. But you keep moving south, and things start to look up. That's actually a photo of the Grenville Channel right there. It's you're just island hopping in BC. It's beautiful, and you're just running down that for about 60 miles.
That was probably the nicest day of the 2 weeks, I think, that we were right around there. But it seemed like every time we were getting towards a food drop or a spot where we could take a rest, where we would essentially rest for a day or so, where we would pick up our food. And every time we were nearing that, we would have some crazy experience and some hurdle to overcome. Here it was the Seymour Narrows. I don't know if any of you know anything about it. It's the center point on the east side of Vancouver Island, and the entire ocean sucks right through there.
Yeah, it's 700 meters wide and only 5K long. It's not a big area, but when you get a 20-foot tidal swing, it's just nasty. I know it sunk about 115 vessels, and it's the kind of stuff that I always thought, oh, that's in Greek mythology, like giant whirlpools that can suck you down and undertow that you feel pulling your body down.
So here's a little clip. I just cut some quick camera clips of what that looked like. We actually hit it at slack tide, and we started going through, and then the tide and the current changed, and it starts firing against us to the point where we can't keep going on it, and we're stuck on a little rock face, and ended up finding a cave to sleep in for the night. And here's what that looked like. Trying to get footage right now. We're in a moving river. I just got knocked off my board. We're literally trapped here. With this, like, we're fucked if we go in it. We're fucked if we go into it. You cannot go through that. Best option, probably climb up. A D-bag one by one, and climb up, and then hike our boards up there, huh? 30 yards to go around, and we can't get around. That was a pretty interesting night. So we got through, we ended up in the cave, and it was great. We collected all the water we needed in a half an hour, because you get crazy rain up there, and I think it was about 12 o'clock at night. We're asleep in the cave, and the whole thing starts rumbling. And coming from California, you're thinking, earthquake, we're in a cave, this is not good. And probably seconds after that thought, a cruise ship passes through the Narrows, and they're so close. We're in this cave, and we can see people eating and partying on board. It was a really bizarre experience.
Yeah, I remember you were wondering, Ryan's, I bet there's a hot tub on board.
I'm sure they have one.
Yeah, but you'd think that it was a moment where, it'd be great to be on the ship, but I actually was so content where I was. We're in this dry cave. We have all the water we need, and we're just watching the cruise ship go by. So I wouldn't have had it any other way at that time.
So we passed through there, and, you always have these obstacles, and then we end up in one of the most beautiful areas I've ever been, the Southern Gulf Islands on the east side of Vancouver Island, the southeast end.
Yeah, it's about as perfect as it can get. I mean, the Olympic range puts up a rain shadow. The air is 70 degrees. Suddenly the water is 60 degrees, and you're enjoying every bit of it, just island hopping.
But as we say, as the tides change and the seasons, so that, you get good weather, you get bad weather. So we crossed over to the north end of Washington, and then we rounded to the west coast, and I think the best way to put it is that it was just a real kick in the nuts. We hadn't planned on it, and worst of all, we weren't used to that swell. So launching and landing, loading all our gear on our board was a process. It would take us about a half an hour each day because we didn't know what we were doing, and then we'd punch through the surf and then have to land through the surf. And this is essentially what Washington was like. It's really embarrassing to watch how slow this process took us at this point in the paddle.
So Washington was not kind to us. I think every day it just seemed like a grind, and we'd already put in, we'd put in 800 miles on our shoulders, and we were just grinding, and it was a beating every single day. You know, it's like your gear's getting pounded, your shoulders are getting torn up, and it never seemed to stop.
I remember it was rough every day. We couldn't knee paddle at all. We got really bad lower spinal pain because just being in that position for so long and the chop and the wind, Washington was rough. But, you know, we kept moving down, and this is a photo actually out at the Columbia River Bar. So I don't know, you can barely see there's some mountains off to the left side that's inside of us, and then a freighter right on the other side of where Casey is inside of us paddling towards shore.
So as Ryan said, that was another crazy day we had a story from, and it just reinforced, you just have to keep going every single time you're tested. And
so we moved down to Oregon, and Oregon was nice. Oregon was warm, but it was also really windy. We had to do some food rationing there, and that led us into what I would call the first major detour or hurdle in our paddle, which is when Casey broke his board. You probably noticed this isn't the same red or orange or yellow board that we initially started with.
Yeah, it was one of those days you start out and the winds start kicking up 25 to 30 on shore. So you're getting bounced around, and you can't really see much because you're so low on the water. And we're about 3/4 of a mile offshore. And if you look at the bathymetry of Oregon, I mean, there's all these sandbars way off there. And suddenly, this huge set wave comes up, and Ryan, who's on the outside, just gets over it. I wasn't as lucky, obviously. The board went, it got caught, and then I felt that weightless feeling that any surfer knows, and you brace for impact. Went over and just slammed right dead in the center of my board, and I knew right away what had happened. I'd broken it. Luckily, the top glassing and the pad held on, so it was still in one piece. It just couldn't take it together. It was pretty beaten. Luckily, Ryan threw the GoPro on.
So you'll see I paddled into Casey. I took one of his bags, threw it on my back. He threw one of his bags on his back, and then sort of splinted the board together. And then you'll see some foam, a little piece of foam hits Casey going in, and that board, you can see it sandwich up right where it's broken. And this is that. Good? We're in a bad spot.
So that was our first major hurdle at the time, and this is just that's what that day was like. You're just beat, and you have a moment. You
Love that photo.
hate life. You just sit there for 5 minutes,
Casey had a
make
black
a
eye.
rollie and think about what you're doing.
I like this photo too because there's a sign behind him and it says unusually high sneaker waves right behind him, and he's got the black eyes. You can just tell it was a rough day. So,
But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, you have to figure out a way to get around that. So I remember Ryan called Joe Bark and said, hey, we got a problem. He said he had a board ready, but we have to go down and get it. And I called my friend Pat up, which is a mini story of friendship here. I mean, we're all the way up in Oregon. I call him, like, he picks up, he goes, hello? I'm like, hey Pat, what are you doing? So I just got up from a nap. I'm like, yeah, we're in Oregon, broke a board. Do you think you'd be able to pick us up? And he goes, yeah, I'll leave in an hour. Yeah, 15 hours later, he showed up in Dune City, Oregon.
So that was a quick turnaround. We essentially drove down. Joe had this board ready for us. We turned around and spent a day at home. And for me, this was the toughest part of the paddle because we'd gone through so much, and in a blink of an eye, we're back home in this bubble. There's like a safety bubble, I'd say. There's friendly faces, people people care about you. You're not in the elements every day. And the next day was the 4th of July, and I didn't want to go back on the water. I was like, I wanted to wait a week. But you know how it goes. You wait a week, you delay, and I mean that can be as good as quitting. So, and for me, I remember I walked into the bathroom, I looked in the mirror, and it sounds cheesy, but it was a really definitive moment in my life. And it was, it was like, well, if I delay, it's as good as quitting. And I'm quitting on myself, and more importantly, it'd be quitting on my brother. And I just said that's not the person I want to be. And I walked out, and the next day was the 4th of July, and we drove back north, all the way back up to Oregon by Dune City.
Yeah, and we were looking at the maps. It turned out we had broken our board exactly halfway through with the journey. And at that time, we knew in a way to expect the unexpected. That was the hard thing about getting back on the water, the grind. You're going to jump back into this, and it's not going to be a fun trip. And it's interesting because, we talk about before the paddle and you're afraid of certain things. And I think it was our mom's biggest fear. She thought we were going to kill each other out there. She actually thought.
Get into a fist fight and someone gets injured or killed, and then we can't keep going. And as a parent, that's probably scary. For us, it was pretty funny. And then our biggest fear were, of course, these guys. We were like, all right, we're going to get eaten up there. We had the shotgun. We spray painted shark stripes on the bottom of the boards. And that was our method.
Yeah, so we dealt with so much, but by midway through, we knew there was only 3 things you had to fear when you're actually out in that water every day. And the first one's weather, second is weather, and the third, you guys probably can tell, is weather. So the weather's what you have to grind through every day. It's a constant. All these marine animals or sharks, you're gonna encounter everything, but it's not a constant. And that's the big thing, you have to take from that, is you deal with it day in and day out.
Yeah, at that point, we learned a lot. You're constantly refining your techniques. We didn't know what we were doing, like we said, but you get better and better, and you refine your techniques as you move down the coast. So at that point on, we learned to read our maps better. We learned how to launch our boards better and get out with our gear. We learned to work as a team. We had bad weather days. We broke another board out off Cape Mendocino, but it wasn't as big of a hurdle. We had, crossed the San Francisco gate.
That brought us into the 4th quarter, which is pretty amazing. It's always that third one that's rough. So we get into the 4th, and we're in California now, kind of more of a home base for us.
And kept moving south until we got to Point Conception, which was essentially the gateway to the promised land, as we called it.
Yeah, it's that final hurdle that everybody's all, Point Conception. You're gonna capsize out there. And by that point, we didn't I mean, we knew we were going to be okay, but it's still, this big mental jump. When you cross that, you're in Southern California now. Everything's going to be warm. There's beer and fish tacos, people on the beach, and for the most part, that's what it was. I mean,
Yeah, so this is coming into landing in Malibu. Right after we got around Point Conception or Gaviota, we're diving down in the water. It was warm, and we met lifeguard crews we paddled with, met other people, amazing people we paddled with down the coastline. We camped out with friends, past landmarks, and eventually got to our final day, leaving Mission Bay to approach the border.
yeah, and the final day was really, I mean, it had been 7 months, and that was the 7 months and 3 days. That was the final day. And it felt like any other day. We were doing the same thing we'd always done. The difference was we had family and friends out there and a few more cameras in our face, but we just cruised south, and it was a perfect day on the water. And finally, you approach the border, and it's such a tangible finish line. It's a trip.
That's crazy. You get up there, and there's the big bull ring on the other side, and you can hear the mariachi music playing, but he and I are looking down. We're looking down at that next point, and we're wondering what's around the next corner. And I know it's true for me, and I think Casey also, that if people weren't waiting for us to come in that day, we just would have kept going, because there's always an adventure that lies ahead. There's that curiosity pushing you forward. You're wondering what's around the next corner.
So we made it in, we're still, so it was kind of anticlimactic in that we wanted to keep going. But what we took from that and what we really wanted to share with you guys at the end was when you're trying to accomplish a huge challenge and goal, is that you need to focus on efficiency. And that boils down to action, what I said, what you're doing and what you're thinking, and whether that's actually helping you get to your end goal. I think back in the beginning, I mean, when it hit the fan with Ryan's glove, I was a terrible teammate. You're yelling at him, but really that's not going to get you anywhere. Like, that's not efficient towards reaching the goal, me telling him he sucks at life and not actually working towards the problem. Or, and then you kind of develop these, like, teamwork after a long period of time. And say one person loses a pair of sunglasses, you have to share the whole time because you don't want the other guy to get his eyes burned. He's going to get messed up. There's all these little things, that you work together as a team. And I like that photo because it kind of symbolizes. But, it's all about everything that you're doing on something like this, whether you're doing an Ironman or a huge challenge that you've set forth. What you're doing should be representative of helping you be more efficient and getting you towards the positive outcome. Like with action, we talk about negative self-talk. If you already decided to commit yourself to something, why would you ever say, oh, can I do this? Is it possible? Because people are going to say no, or even in your head, you're going to say no. And that's the kind of stuff you have to leave at the door if you're doing something, because it's not going to get you anywhere. You already decided, so why would you ever even second guess yourself? And that's just not efficient behavior.
Another point on that is the tools, the gear you have. And, any challenge you undertake, or if you're pushing the limits of what you can do, or you're pushing the limits of what's been done, the gear is going to have to rise to meet that challenge and evolve to meet the challenges that we all put it through. And I think that's something that's really cool to point out when anyone's pushing the boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with gear, you have to ask yourself two things as it pertains to efficiency. The first is, what environment am I going to be in? For us, we're going to be in the water, right? And it's going to be raining all the time. So the big thing is waterproof. Everything has to be waterproof. I mean, if you're in the desert, obviously, things are going to change, but you have to ask yourself that. And secondly, I think that's really important is, do I really need this? We oftentimes take a lot of stuff that we don't really need. Everything that we brought, especially by the end, were things that we needed, and a lot of the times we mistake those for luxuries. So if everything has a utility, you're going to be moving more efficiently towards your goal.
Yeah, and having a plan B, everything that we had out on the board electronic died. Everything. We had a GPS for about 3 days. Supposed to be waterproof, that died, but thankfully we had our marine charts. Everything except the one thing that stayed alive was the watch I was wearing, and that was it.
Yeah, I think that's the good final point with gear, is that you always need a plan B. You need a backup for everything. So like Ryan said, your GPS goes down, you have nautical charts. Okay, you get a ding in the board, you have a repair kit. That doesn't work. Okay, you have duct tape. There's all these backups with everything you use, because when you're out on an adventure, I'm sure you guys know, things things go wrong, things go south pretty quick, and there's always a problem that you're going to have to face. And it's all about meeting the challenges, whether that be through your action or through your gear. And yeah, I think
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
If you have any questions, we're happy to answer.
And yeah, North American Paddle is the Instagram, but we don't really
Yeah,
update
question.
it.
I'm just curious why the prone paddle instead of the sea kayak?
So why? The question is why prone paddling, not a sea kayak?
It's the slowest way to travel, by far.
Least efficient way to go down the coast.
It looks like the most uncomfortable.
It can be. I think for us, as growing up as surfers, it's natural. Like let's hand.
So
let's hand
he
paddle.
asked why prone paddling and not sea kayaks, to let everyone know. Okay, well, oh, you did. Okay, well, yeah, I don't know. We just been prone paddling, and it just seemed like a different way to go about it than people have ever done before, because no one had really done an expeditionary prone paddle. So we said, let's go for it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions? All right. Yeah.
We started in March because it was just where things were starting to warm up, but also we want to get through the West Coast before the big winter swells hit. I mean, we got around Point Conception. It was pretty much perfect timing, right as that first big swell of that fall winter time hit.
Yeah, I think 2 weeks after we actually finished, we ended up getting a swell that was 15 feet at 18 seconds, which is going to bring in 20-foot waves. So it was all about that perfect window. And although it didn't work out, we had this idea that we were going to get through California before September and October, which was the major shark season. That's when all the white sharks come in. That didn't work out, but
Yeah. Are we what? Yeah, we are fighting less after this. Yeah, I think, so, Inside Passage, you've got 6 hours, 2 6-hour periods to move down the coast. And if we're fighting, that's a waste of time. So we had to learn to work together.
yeah, you're too reliant on each other to actually fight.
But I've been gone for about a month and a half, so I think we're due for a good fist fight.
Yep.
Any other questions?
We started on March 18th, and 2016, and we ended on October 21st. So we've got a few things planned, more different areas. We're going to want to go down to the southern hemisphere, mix paddling in with some multidisciplinary stuff with some climbing, and then we have plans to do some stuff up in the Aleutian Islands up there.
Well, I think that's it. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.